Inaudible chatter and ambient noise. In April of 1841, Silas Rutledge made an announcement that shocked even the meanest plantation owners in South Carolina. He was placing his daughter, Catherine, a woman weighing over 260 pounds, under the complete control of an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross. Not as a nurse, not as a helper. As her keeper, in every way that mattered except on paper. The white society of Colton County was scandalized, but they had no idea what Rutledge was truly doing, or what Ezekiel Cross would do to Catherine. Over the following months, by November, Catherine's body had changed in ways no one could explain. 13 men were dead, and Cypress Grove Plantation was nothing but ashes. What really happened between that enslaved man and the plantation owner's daughter? What did he do to her that scared everyone who saw it? Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Spring in Colton County arrived with crushing heat and wetness that made the air feel heavy. The Combahee River moved slowly through the low country, its dark water reflecting Spanish moss that hung from live oak trees like funeral curtains. Rice fields stretched for miles, worked by hundreds of enslaved people who moved through water up to their knees from sunrise until sunset. This was wealth built on suffering, success taken from human misery, all of it justified by men who convinced themselves that cruelty was simply the natural order of things. Cypress Grove Plantation sat on 800 acres. Its owner, Silas Rutledge, was not quite part of the county's elite, but desperately wanted to be. He owned 58 enslaved people, which made him wealthy by most standards, but barely qualified him as mid-tier in local society. The truly powerful families owned thousands of acres and hundreds of slaves. Their names carried weight that could open doors or destroy reputations with a single word. Silas had married Elizabeth Yancey, a marriage that brought moderate land holdings and a respected last name. She died giving birth to a daughter named Catherine. For 28 years, Silas raised Catherine alone while focusing his energies on gaining entry to the inner circles of county power. He was a tall man, thin in the way of people who forget to eat when consumed by obsession. His daughter Catherine had grown up isolated. She was 28 years old and weighed nearly 260 pounds. Her body was swollen from years of medications prescribed by doctors who diagnosed her with hysteria and female nervous disorders. She suffered violent fits where she would scream and throw objects. She had attacked her father with a letter opener the previous year, leaving a scar across his left hand. The white society whispered about her with false sympathy. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew what Catherine had witnessed when she was 12 years old, or that her madness was not madness at all, but a normal response to living with monsters. The letter arrived on April 7. Silas opened it in his study, expecting business mail. Instead, he found 3 pages on expensive paper sealed with red wax bearing a symbol he recognized immediately. A scythe crossed with wheat stalks, the mark of the Brethren of the Harvest. The Brethren were 13 men who gathered in darkness to perform rituals they believed strengthened the land through blood sacrifice. They mixed old European traditions with beliefs borrowed from enslaved people who understood spirits and power. Silas had been initiated years prior. The letter informed him he was in debt. An impossible sum. Repayment would require selling most of his land and all his slaves, destroying everything he had built. But the letter offered an alternative. A demonstration of commitment from members in difficult positions. Silas would take his daughter Catherine and place her under the complete authority of one of his enslaved men. Not temporarily, not as punishment, but as a genuine transfer of responsibility, lasting 1 full year. The enslaved man would have total control over her person, her daily activities, and her treatment. Silas would announce this publicly at a gathering of the county's prominent families, explaining it as an extreme medical measure for his daughter's condition. The humiliation would be absolute. In a society where white women were supposedly precious and protected above all others, Silas would be declaring his daughter worth less than his property. But if he agreed, his debt would be forgiven, and the Brethren would provide financial support to restore his position. Silas sat in his study for hours that night. He thought about his options. Bankruptcy would destroy him completely. The Brethren had connections to every judge, every lawyer, every politician in the region. They could make him disappear if he became a problem. Or he could sacrifice his daughter's dignity to maintain his own position. The choice society had trained him to make. Property over people, power over morality. He wrote his acceptance by candlelight and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter arrived with a name and brief history. Ezekiel Cross, age 33, purchased recently through an intermediary from a Virginia plantation. Skills included carpentry and herbal medicine. Temperament listed as quiet and obedient. What the letter did not say was that Ezekiel Cross had been selected specifically for this purpose, that his placement at Cypress Grove was no accident, that he carried his own burning need for justice and the patience to wait for exactly the right moment. Ezekiel arrived on April 13 in a wagon driven by a slave trader. The wagon pulled directly to the main house. Unusual since most slave transactions happened near the barns. Silas came out onto the porch. In the wagon bed sat Ezekiel. The first thing Silas noticed was his eyes. Most enslaved people kept their gaze down as a survival method, but Ezekiel looked directly at Silas, his expression calm and assessing. It made Silas deeply uncomfortable. Ezekiel was tall, with broad shoulders and lean muscle. His skin was unmarked by whipping scars. His hands were large and calloused, but his fingers had a precision that suggested skilled work. The transaction completed quickly. Ezekiel was shown to a small cabin near the main house, separate from other slave quarters. He was given basic supplies and told his duties would begin the next day. He was informed that his sole responsibility was Catherine's care and that failure would have severe consequences. Ezekiel nodded and said, "Yes, sir," when required. Then he was left alone. For the first time since arriving, he allowed his expression to change. He sat on the bed and pulled from inside his shirt a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a piece of worn paper with 3 names written in a child's uncertain handwriting. Sarah, Benjamin, Ruth. His wife, his son, his daughter, sold away from him 3 years ago to a plantation in Alabama known for working slaves to death. He had learned they all died within 18 months. And Silas Rutledge had been the one to sell them. Not because he needed money, but because he had been demonstrating to the brethren that he could make hard decisions without sentimentality. He had split a family like he folded the paper. He tucked the names away. Then he lay back and stared at the ceiling and began planning what came next. His first day began on April 14. A house slave named Judith brought him to Catherine's room on the 2nd floor. She knocked reluctantly. A crash from inside, something heavy hitting the wall. Then Catherine's voice, slurred but venomous. "I do not want more treatments. Send him away." Judith looked at Ezekiel with sympathy. "She has bad days. This is one." Ezekiel opened the door and stepped inside, closing it before Judith could follow. The room was large but dark. Heavy curtains drawn. The air was stale, smelling of unwashed bedding and something else, the sweet rot smell of laudanum. Books scattered across the floor. A shattered picture against the wall. Clothes everywhere. Catherine sat in a chair by the cold fireplace, wrapped in a stained dressing gown. Her dark hair hung loose and tangled. Her face was puffy, eyes unfocused. Her hands trembled continuously on the chair arms. She looked at Ezekiel with confusion, then fear, then anger. "Who are you?" I said. "No more doctors." "I am not a doctor, miss. My name is Ezekiel. Your father asked me to help you." "Help." She laughed harshly. "That is what they all say. Help, treatment, medicine. They mean poison. They mean chains. They mean silence." She stood suddenly, swaying. "I know what this is. He is punishing me again for remembering, for speaking, for refusing to forget." Ezekiel stood still, non-threatening. "What are you supposed to forget?" The question caught her off guard. Her anger flickered to something more vulnerable. "You do not know." "I know nothing, miss. Only that your father says you are unwell." Catherine studied him intently, as if really seeing him for the first time. "You are not from here. Virginia originally, miss. Do you know what happens in this house? What they do in the cellar?" Ezekiel's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "I do not know what you mean." "Liar. No heat in it, just exhaustion. Everyone lies. It is easier than the truth." She sat heavily. "Leave me alone. Tell my father his newest torment failed." But Ezekiel moved to the window and drew open the curtains. Sunlight flooded in. Catherine cried out, covering her eyes. "When did you last go outside, miss? I cannot walk that far. I'm too weak." "When did you last eat without laudanum?" "The medicine is necessary. Doctors say so." What if the doctors are wrong? Her hands came down from her eyes. She stared at him with hope and terror mixed. What did you say? Ezekiel turned from the window. This was the moment. I said, what if the doctors are wrong? What if everything you have been told about your condition is designed not to help you, but to keep you controllable? What if your father has been poisoning you for years to ensure you never become well enough to speak about what you saw? Absolute silence. Catherine's eyes went wide, her trembling hands stilled. For half a minute, she just sat there, her mind working. When she spoke, her voice was different, clearer. He told you. Your father told me nothing, miss. But I have eyes. I know about laudanum poisoning. I know mercury sickness. Healthy women do not become like this without someone working hard to make them that way. Why would you say this? Suspicion crept back. This is a trick. You are testing me. I am telling you I can help you become truly well. Clear-minded, strong enough to walk out of this room. But it will not be easy. Your body has been dependent on those medicines for years. Stopping will be painful. You will feel worse before better, and your father will not approve. Then why would you do it? Ezekiel met her eyes. Because I have my own reasons for wanting Silas Rutledge to suffer. And the best way to make him suffer is to give him back a daughter who is sane enough to remember everything and strong enough to speak about it. The truth, spoken plainly. Catherine was damaged, not stupid. She would see through manipulation, but genuine common cause she might believe. You want revenge on my father? Yes, miss. What did he do to you? He sold my family. My wife and 2 children. Sent them to their deaths for no reason except to prove something to people who judge worth by cruelty. Catherine absorbed this, then nodded slowly. The brethren. He sold them for the brethren. You know of them. She laughed, something manic in it. You will learn. Everyone learns eventually. She leaned forward. If I agree, if I let you help me, what happens then? You get well, miss. And when you are well, we decide what to do next. I have my revenge to plan. You have yours. Perhaps they align. Catherine studied him intently. Finally, she spoke. I want them all dead. My father, Judge Pelham, Reverend Crenshaw, all of them. Every man who stood in that cellar. I want them to suffer first. To know it is coming. To beg. Then I want them dead. The venom was shocking, not for its intensity, but because it came from someone dismissed as mad and harmless. This was not madness. This was rage concentrated by years of suppression. Ezekiel nodded. Then we have an understanding, Miss Catherine. If we are conspirators, use my name. I cannot. Miss, you, not where anyone might hear. We must be careful. Then know something, Ezekiel. Catherine's eyes glittered dangerously. I have killed before. 3 people, house slaves who might have told my father about my lucid moments. I cannot remember exactly how. The laudanum blurs everything, but I know I did it. They disappeared. Their families were told they ran away. She smiled terribly. So if you plan to betray me, to use me, then dispose of me, know that I am not a victim. I am something worse. Ice ran down Ezekiel's spine. He had expected an ally, not someone whose capacity for violence might exceed his own, but he kept steady. I believe you, miss. And I will not betray you. Good. Catherine stood more steadily. Then let us begin. But I have one condition. When this is over, when we have had our revenge, I want to die. I do not want to live with what I have seen and done. You will help me with that, too. Agreed. Ezekiel had not expected that, but he was committed now. Then we have a deal. Catherine extended her hand. After a hesitation, Ezekiel shook it. Her grip was stronger than expected. Over the following week, Ezekiel began Catherine's treatment. He gradually reduced her laudanum, replacing it with herbal tinctures, valerian root for anxiety and sleep, chamomile for digestive distress, milk thistle to help her liver process accumulated toxins. The process was brutal. Catherine spent days in bed with fever, shaking, and vomiting. Ezekiel stayed with her through it, holding a basin, wiping her face with cool cloths, speaking quietly just to remind her she was not alone. When the worst passed, she was weak, but clearer than she had been in years. The constant tremor decreased. Her speech was less slurred. She could focus on reading. Then real work began. Ezekiel had her walking short distances at first, from her room to the hallway end and back. It exhausted her, but he insisted, every day, a little further. He adjusted her diet, bringing lean meats and vegetables instead of heavy pastries. He limited portions strictly, though she fought him. Years of using food as comfort made restriction difficult. While working on her physical recovery, they talked. Catherine told him about the cellar, about what she saw at 12. She described it in detail that made Ezekiel's stomach turn, but he listened without interruption. She told him about years of gaslighting that followed. Her father convinced everyone, including herself, that she was mad, that she invented memories, that nothing she said could be trusted. She told him about the journals she kept hidden, pages documenting dates and times when her father left late at night, names of visitors at strange hours, sounds from below that should not be possible. Ezekiel told her about his family, about Sarah who sang while working and taught their children to read despite the danger. About Benjamin, who at 8 could do mathematics that amazed overseers. About Ruth, who loved flowers and picked wild blooms to make their cabin beautiful. He told her how Silas came to the Virginia plantation with a buyer's warrant, how he inspected them like livestock, how he made his choice with a cold, dismissive wave. As Catherine grew stronger, their conspiracy deepened. They were no longer just patient and caretaker, or even just allies in revenge. They became something else entirely, a single furious will housed in 2 bodies, planning the harvest of 13 men. And outside, the white society of Colton County whispered, scandalized but oblivious, about the shameful arrangement at Cypress Grove. They had no idea that the madness they dismissed was being forged into a weapon, or that the quiet enslaved man they ignored was its smith. The reckoning was coming. It would begin with a whisper in the dark and end with screams in the firelight. And by November, the ashes of Cypress Grove would blow across the rice fields, carrying with them the truth of what happens when the oppressed decide to become the harvesters.